Do you remember the specific magic of waking up in December during the 90s? It was the smell of a fresh pine tree, the sound of the Coca-Cola polar bear commercials on TV, and the serious business of circling every single toy you wanted in the holiday catalogue. But then, the season changed. The toy stores closed their doors, the catalogues stopped coming in the mail, and that pure, tangible excitement was replaced by digital gift cards and online shopping. Today, we are capturing that spirit again. We are unwrapping 50 forgotten memories and traditions that made Christmas in the 90s the absolute peak of childhood. We have included some deeply buried memories on this list, from specific tree ornaments to discontinued holiday specials that most people haven't thought about in 30 years. Let's see if you are one of the few who remembers them all. Please like the video and subscribe for more nostalgia, and let me know in the comments. What was the one holy grail gift you wanted more than anything else growing up? Now, settle in, get warm, relax, and let the journey begin. Number 1. Circling toys in the JCPenney and Sears Christmas catalogues. The sun has already set even though it is only 5 in the afternoon. You have just come in from the cold, your cheeks flushed pink from the wind, dropping your heavy backpack by the door. The house is warm, and there is a distinct savoury smell of dinner cooking in the next room, maybe meatloaf, or just the scent of onions sizzling in a pan. But your attention isn't on food yet. It's on the mail piled up on the kitchen counter. Amidst the white envelopes of bills and flyers, you see it. It is massive, heavy, and colourful. The sheer weight of it promises months of dreaming. You grab it with both hands, the glossy cover cool against your fingertips, and you run to the living room. You slide down onto the carpet, lying on your stomach with your legs kicking idly in the air behind you. The television is on low in the background, perhaps the evening news or a rerun of a sitcom, but it fades into white noise. You have work to do. You reach for a marker, maybe a black permanent marker, or perhaps just a blue ballpoint pen you found in the junk drawer. You crack the spine of the book, bypassing the hundreds of pages of clothes and furniture that look like boring things your parents worry about. You flip straight to the back, to the section where the pages seem brighter, more chaotic, and infinitely more important. You have arrived at the toy section. This was not just shopping, it was a ritual of curation. In a world before online wish lists or screenshots, this 3-inch thick book was the only portal you had to the wider world of things. There was a specific tactile sound to the pages turning, a heavy, crinkling shuffle that filled the quiet room. You would scan every square inch of the page, your eyes darting from action figures to board games, analysing the carefully staged dioramas where happy children played with toys that looked larger than life. Do you remember the feeling of the pen pressing into the paper? The decisive scratch as you drew a thick, heavy circle around the object of your desire? There was a strategy to it. You knew, deep down, that you couldn't have everything. If you circled too much, your parents might not know what you really wanted. But if you circled too little, you might wake up on Christmas morning to a tree void of surprises. So you developed a hierarchy. Some items got a single, polite circle. The absolute necessities, the Super Nintendo games, the specific Lego monorail set, got 3 circles and maybe a star next to them. There was a quiet comfort in this solitude. Your siblings might be in the other room, or doing homework, but for this hour, it was just you and the book. You could smell the ink of the pages, a unique scent of mass-produced gloss that is instantly recognisable to anyone who grew up in the 90s. It was a time of pure possibility. As long as the catalogue was open and the ink was wet, you owned everything on those pages. The disappointment of reality was months away. For now, under the soft yellow light of the living room lamp, you were the architect of your own perfect Christmas. Number 2. The Tickle Me Elmo chaos. The automatic doors of the shopping mall slide open with a rush of warm, dry air. You're immediately hit by the wall of sound that was a shopping mall in December of 1996. It is a chaotic symphony of footsteps, muffled pop music playing over loudspeakers, and the distant murmur of hundreds of conversations. The air smells of cinnamon sugar from the pretzel stand, mixed with the faint chemical tang of floor wax and perfume samples from the department store entrance. You're holding your mother's hand tightly because the crowd is dense, a sea of winter coats and shopping bags moving in every direction. You're not here for clothes or shoes. You're making the pilgrimage to the toy store, perhaps a KB Toys or a massive Toys R Us. There is a frantic energy in the air that you, even as a child, can sense. The adults seem tense. They're walking with purpose, their eyes scanning the displays with a mix of determination and panic. You reach the aisle where the preschool toys are kept, the place where the bright red boxes should be stacked high. But instead of an abundance of plush toys, you see something that feels almost apocalyptic: empty metal shelves. This wasn't just a popular toy, it was a cultural event that took over the entire holiday season. Do you remember seeing the footage on the nightly news? You would be sitting in the living room, the glow of the television casting long shadows, watching grainy video of adults sprinting through store doors as soon as they unlocked. It seemed baffling at the time. Why were grown-ups pushing each other for a small, vibrating red monster? But it added a layer of myth to the object. The fact that it was impossible to find made it the most important thing in the world. If you were one of the lucky few who actually saw one in person, the experience was strangely mesmerizing. The toy was soft, with that distinct synthetic fur texture that felt warm under your fingers. You would press the specific spot on its belly, and the electronics inside would whir to life. It didn't just make a sound, it shook. The vibration was surprisingly strong, a mechanical tremor that made the whole doll shudder as it let out that high-pitched, infectious giggle. It was simple technology, yet in the pre-digital world of the mid-90s it felt like magic. The memory of Tickle Me Elmo is less about playing with the doll and more about the atmosphere it created. It represents the peak of 90s consumer craziness, a time when a single item could capture the imagination of the entire country. It brings back memories of overhear conversations between your parents, whispering about shipments and store opening times. It reminds you of the sheer relief on a parent's face when they finally secured the box, walking out of the store clutching it like a trophy. It was a chaotic, loud, and uniquely 90s version of a treasure hunt. Number 3. Waiting all year for Christmas TV specials. The room is dark, save for the colourful, flickering lights of the Christmas tree in the corner and the soft blue glow of the television screen. It is a school night, but the rules feel slightly suspended. You're sitting on the sofa, maybe with a bowl of popcorn that's slightly too salty, or a cup of hot chocolate that has cooled down just enough to drink without burning your tongue. In your lap sits the holy text of 1990s entertainment, the TV guide. The newsprint feels rough against your skin, and your thumb is holding the place on tonight's grid, right where it says 8 p.m. In the era before streaming, before DVRs, and before on-demand anything, this moment was sacred. You didn't just watch television, you made an appointment with it. If the TV guide said Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was airing on Tuesday at 8, you were there at 7:55, ensuring the channel was set and the reception was clear. There was a genuine anxiety to it. If you were late, if you had basketball practice, or if your parents made you stay at the dinner table too long, you missed it. And missing it didn't mean watching it later. It meant waiting 365 days to see it again. Do you remember the specific introductory jingles? The spinning CBS special presentation graphic, accompanied by those triumphant festive horns. That sound was a Pavlovian trigger. It signaled that the ordinary world was fading away and the holiday magic was officially starting. As the special began, the living room felt cozier. The claymation figures of Rudolph, Hermie, and the abominable snow monster moved with that charming, jerky stop-motion rhythm that looked so distinct on a CRT screen. The audio had a specific crackle to it, a warmth that modern high-definition restoration somehow scrubs away. Even the commercials were part of the ritual. You couldn't skip them, so you watched them. They were a parade of seasonal joy, commercials for Folgers coffee where the brother comes home for Christmas, or the M&Ms meeting Santa. They became as familiar as the show itself. You would use these breaks to run to the kitchen for a refill or to the bathroom, sprinting back the moment you heard the show's theme music return, sliding in your socks across the linoleum floor to dive back onto the couch just in time. This scarcity made the experience incredibly rich. You weren't half watching while scrolling on a phone, you were fully immersed. The fact that millions of other kids were watching the exact same thing at the exact same moment created a silent nationwide bond. You knew that tomorrow at school, everyone would be talking about Heat Miser or Frosty. It was a shared cultural event, fleeting and fragile, which made every second of that hour feel like a precious gift you had to unwrap slowly. Number 4. The Coca-Cola Christmas truck commercial. It is a Tuesday evening in late November. You're lying on the living room floor, your math homework spread out in front of you, but you aren't really looking at it. Outside, the wind is howling against the window pane, rattling the glass just enough to remind you that winter is settling in. The room is dimly lit, illuminated mostly by the blue flickering light of the television set. You're watching a sitcom, waiting for the punchlines, but then the screen fades to black for a commercial break. Suddenly you hear a faint rhythmic chiming sound. It starts quietly, sleigh bells ringing in the distance, growing louder and more insistent. Then, a deep choral melody begins to swell. Holidays are coming, holidays are coming. You look up from your textbook, abandoning your fractions. On the screen, a line of massive red semi-trucks is winding its way through a snowy, enchanted forest. They are covered in thousands of twinkling lights, illuminating the dark trees like a moving city. This was not just an advertisement for a soft drink, it was the official starting gun for the holiday season. In the 90s, you didn't look at a calendar to know when Christmas began. You waited for this specific 30-second clip. Seeing the Santa Claus on the back of the truck, raising his bottle in a toast, gave you a physical feeling of excitement in your chest. It meant that school break was close. It meant that snow days were possible. It meant that the world was about to change from grey and cold to bright and magical. Do you remember the way the lights on the truck seemed to glow with an impossible warmth? The commercial created a world that looked cozier than reality ever could be. The snow was perfectly white, and the families watching the trucks pass looked perfectly happy. For a child watching in a quiet suburban living room, those trucks felt like they were driving straight towards your house, bringing the spirit of the season with them. The sound design of that commercial was a masterpiece of comfort. The holidays are coming chant was repetitive, hypnotic, and instantly soothing. It drilled into your brain, becoming the soundtrack of your winter. When you heard it, the stress of school, the arguments with siblings, and the cold weather outside all faded away. It was a promise. It told you that no matter what else was happening, Christmas was coming, and it was going to be beautiful. It was a signal that it was time to start hoping, time to start dreaming, and time to believe that something wonderful was just around the corner. Number 5. The Home Alone VHS tape marathon. It is that strange, timeless void between Christmas Day and New Year's Eve. You have no school. The days are short and the sun seems to give up by 4 in the afternoon. The house is quiet, perhaps with your parents back at work, leaving you in charge of the living room domain. You're wearing thick wool socks and an oversized t-shirt, surrounded by the remnants of holiday candy. You approach the entertainment centre, that towering piece of oak furniture with glass doors, and scan the shelf for the familiar spine. It is a white plastic case with a photo of a boy screaming, his hands slapped against his cheeks. You slide the chunky black cassette out of its sleeve and push it into the VCR. The machine swallows it with a heavy, satisfying mechanical ka-chunk, followed by the whirring sound of the tape heads engaging. The television screen flickers with static before settling into the tracking lines of the FBI warning, then the majestic fanfare of the 20th Century Fox logo. For the next 2 hours, you are not in your living room. You're in the McAllister's massive brick house in the Chicago suburbs, living out the ultimate childhood fantasy. Watching Home Alone on VHS was a physical ritual. It wasn't just pressing play, it was rewinding the best parts. It was pausing the tape to go get a snack, leaving a shaky, paused image of Marv or Harry frozen on the screen. The film itself felt like a companion. By 1993, you'd likely seen it a dozen times, yet you watched it again. You memorized the layout of the house. You knew exactly when the pizza delivery driver would knock over the statue. You mouthed the words along with the characters, reciting, "Keep the change, you filthy animal," with perfect timing. This obsession deepened with Home Alone 2 and the introduction of the Talk Boy. Suddenly the movie wasn't just a story, it was a catalogue for the coolest gadget in existence. Every kid wanted that grey cassette recorder with the extendable microphone. The movie made it seem like a spy tool, a weapon of wit that could outsmart adults and book hotel rooms. Owning the VHS tape meant you could study Kevin's techniques, learning how to rig paint cans or use a tape recorder to trick the world. There was a profound sense of empowerment in those viewings. In a world where you were always told what to do by teachers and parents, Kevin McAllister was the king of his own castle. Sitting there in the glow of the CRT TV, eating leftover Christmas cookies, you felt a vicarious thrill of independence. You looked around your own living room and wondered, if 2 burglars tried to break in right now, which ornaments would I put under the window? It was a comforting, safe danger, wrapped up in a John Williams score that sounded like the very essence of Christmas. Number 6. Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. It is the calm afternoon of December 27th. The initial frenzy of opening presents has passed, and the house has settled into a comfortable, lazy rhythm. You're in your bedroom, the carpet still dusted with stray pieces of glitter and torn tape. The winter sun is streaming through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. You're wearing your favourite pyjamas, the ones with the feet that make you slide on the hardwood, and you're holding an object that feels heavier and more substantial than any action figure you have ever owned before. You turn it over in your hands, marvelling at the sheer density of it. The white plastic is smooth and cool to the touch, contrasting with the vibrant lime green and purple accents. This wasn't just a doll, it was a piece of the future that you could hold. You press the large red button on the chest, and the wings snap open with a satisfying, forceful thwack, spanning out like a plastic eagle. It is a mechanical sound, crisp and decisive, that you will never tire of hearing. In 1996, Toy Story had changed the way we looked at our possessions. Owning a Buzz Lightyear didn't feel like owning a toy. It felt like you had pulled a character directly out of the movie screen and into your life. He was high-tech. He had a laser on his arm. Sure, it was just a red LED bulb, but in the dim light of your closet, it looked powerful enough to slice through steel. He had a clear plastic helmet that whooshed back with a smooth aerodynamic motion. And when you pressed the buttons on his side, his voice box spat out those immortal lines, "To infinity and beyond." The magic of this toy was in the details that connected it to the film. You would find yourself flipping him over to check the bottom of his boot, half expecting to see Andy written there in permanent marker. You would leave the room and then suddenly burst back in, hoping to catch him moving on his own, hoping to see him holding a staff meeting with your other toys. He was the commander of your bedroom floor, the coolest, most advanced piece of plastic in the neighbourhood. Do you remember the specific robotic sound of his joints moving? Unlike the rubbery limbs of older toys, Buzz clicked. You could pose him in heroic stances, aiming his laser at the door, guarding your room from imaginary invaders. He represented a shift in childhood play, moving from simple soldiers to complex characters with backstories and personalities. Holding him made you feel part of something bigger, a cinematic universe that was just beginning. He was more than a gift. He was a companion who was falling with style right into your childhood memories. Number 7. Tamagotchi Virtual Pets. It is late at night, perhaps 2 in the morning. The house is completely silent, settled into the deep, heavy sleep of winter. You're warm under your duvet, the heavy blankets pulled up to your chin. The room is dark, lit only by the faint orange glow of a street lamp filtering through the curtains. You're drifting off, your breathing slowing down, when suddenly you hear it. A sharp, high-pitched electronic beep. It cuts through the silence like an alarm. You don't groan or roll over. You react with instant maternal instinct. You reach out into the cold air, your hand fumbling on the bedside table until your fingers close around a small, smooth, egg-shaped piece of plastic. You pull it under the covers, creating a tent of darkness, and squint at the tiny, non-backlit LCD screen. There, in the grey-green digital void, your pet is calling for you. This was the Christmas of the responsibility. If you received a Tamagotchi in 1997, you didn't just get a toy, you got a dependent. The holiday season became a blur of checking that small screen every 30 minutes. While your family was watching movies or eating leftover ham, you were surreptitiously checking the hunger meter or cleaning up digital droppings. It was a relentless cycle of feeding, playing and scolding performed with 3 tiny rubber buttons. Do you remember the genuine anxiety of it? The fear that you would wake up to find a tombstone on the screen instead of your happy little blob? It taught an entire generation about mortality in the weirdest possible way. There was something oddly hypnotic about the low-resolution animations. Watching it eat the little loaf of bread or shake its head no gave you a strange sense of satisfaction. You had kept it alive for another hour. You were a good parent. It was the beginning of our tether to technology. Before smartphones, this was the first thing you checked when you woke up, and the last thing you checked before you slept. It hung on your belt loop or sat in your pocket like a tiny, demanding heart. In the quiet of those Christmas holidays, amidst the noise of family and the distraction of other gifts, that simple beeping egg held your complete and undivided attention. Number 8. Furby Under the Tree. It is around 4 in the afternoon on Christmas Day. The major chaos of the morning has subsided, and the house has taken on a warm, lazy atmosphere. The dining table is set for the big meal, smelling of roast turkey and sage stuffing. You're in the living room, surrounded by a mountain of crumpled wrapping paper that hasn't been cleaned up yet. Adults are chatting in the kitchen, glasses clinking, their voices rising and falling in steady rhythm. You're sitting on the rug, examining your haul, when suddenly you hear a sound coming from the shadows beneath the tree. It starts as a mechanical grinding noise, gears turning against gears, followed by a strange, high-pitched sneeze. Achoo. The conversation in the kitchen doesn't stop, but you freeze. You crawl over to the box you opened earlier, the one that everyone said was the It gift of 1998. There, staring back at you with giant, blinking plastic eyelids, is a Furby. It opens its beak and lets out a string of nonsense syllables. Duma! Ka! Ai ai! Before humming a low, vibrating tune. The Furby phenomenon was distinct because it walked the fine line between adorable and absolutely terrifying. It was an owl-hamster hybrid covered in synthetic fur, but unlike a stuffed animal, it had presence. It watched you. The marketing claimed it would learn English the more you spoke to it, a promise that made it feel like a living guest in your home rather than a toy. You spent hours talking to it, convinced that it was slowly understanding you, waiting for that magical moment when it would switch from Furbish to a full sentence. But the true memory of the Furby is not the playing, it is the inability to make it stop. There was no off switch. This was the design flaw that defined the experience. You would put it on the shelf thinking it was asleep, only for it to wake up at 3 in the morning because a truck drove by outside. Its eyelids would flutter open in the dark, the gears would grind, and it would start chatting to an empty room. Do you recall the stories? The rumours that they were spies recording your conversations? Or the collective solution that every family seemed to discover independently? The closet. By the day after Christmas, thousands of these creatures were stuffed into the back of linen closets, or buried under piles of laundry, their muffled voices crying out, "Me sleepy," from the darkness. It was a toy that demanded attention, a strange robotic intruder that brought a mix of wonder and mild paranoia to the end of the millennium. Number 9. Christmas Lights Neighbourhood Drives. It is a pitch-black evening, the kind where the sky feels low and heavy with potential snow. Dinner is finished, the dishes are stacked in the sink, and the house is settling into a sleepy rhythm. But then, your dad jingles the keys in his pocket and says the magic words, "Go get your coats." Instantly the energy shifts. You scramble to find your boots, fighting with zippers and scarves, before rushing out into the biting cold air of the driveway. You pile into the back seat of the family vehicle, maybe a Dodge Caravan, a Plymouth Voyager, or a station wagon with wood panelling. The seats are freezing against your legs for the first few minutes. You can see your breath in the air inside the car until the engine warms up and the heater kicks in, blasting that specific dusty hot air that smells faintly of gasoline and winter comfort. You buckle your seatbelt, sliding into the middle seat so you can see out of both sides. This wasn't just a drive, it was an expedition. Your parents would navigate to the specific neighbourhoods known for their displays, the ones where every house seemed to be in a competition for the electric bill. As you turned onto those streets, the car would slow to a crawl, the headlights cutting through the darkness. You would press your face against the cold glass of the window, your breath fogging it up every few seconds, forcing you to wipe a porthole so you could see the spectacle. Do you remember the soundtrack? It was always the local radio station that switched to a 24-hour holiday format on December 1st. The signal might have been a little fuzzy, static crackling around the edges of Nat King Cole or Bing Crosby. There was a hypnotic quality to it. The combination of the slow-moving car, the warmth of the heater, and the soft crooning on the radio. It made the world outside look like a silent movie, a series of glowing tableaux separated by stretches of darkness. There was a specific joy in critiquing the houses. You would point out the ones with the elegant all-white icicle lights, admiring their classiness. Then you would cheer for the chaotic ones, the lawns cluttered with 10 different plastic Santas and flashing multicolour bulbs. For that hour, your family was a contained unit, floating through the night in a bubble of warmth. It didn't matter if you were arguing earlier, or if you were stressed about school. In the glow of those passing lights, reflected in your tired eyes, everything felt perfect and peaceful. Number 10. The toys are Us Christmas Commercial. It is Saturday morning around 9 o'clock. You're still in your pyjamas, perhaps the flannel ones with the tartan pattern. You're sitting on the floor, your legs tucked under you, with a plastic bowl of cereal resting on the coffee table. The milk has turned a sugary pink or blue, and the cartoons are blaring. The show cuts to a commercial break. You see ads for sugary snacks and board games, but then a specific soft melody begins. It's a jingle that is more famous to you than the national anthem. On the screen, a cartoon giraffe waves, and you're transported into a massive warehouse-sized dreamland. This wasn't just a store. It was a sovereign nation of childhood. The commercial didn't focus on one specific toy. Instead, it sold you a feeling. It showed children running through endless aisles stacked to the ceiling with boxes. It showed Geoffrey the giraffe guiding them like a benevolent king. And then, that chorus hit. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. Do you remember how true that lyric felt? It wasn't just a catchy slogan. It was a philosophy. In the 90s, the idea of growing up seemed terrible. It meant taxes and boring clothes. But being a Toys R Us kid meant bicycles, video games, and slime. The commercial promised that as long as you walked through those sliding glass doors, you could stay young forever. The song itself is permanently etched into your brain. You can probably hear the exact cadence of from bikes to trains to video games. It brings back the sensory memory of the store itself, the smell of rubber tires in the bike section, the wall of pink in the Barbie aisle, and the holy grail of the video game ticket slips. Seeing that commercial on TV was a reminder that the best place on earth was waiting for you, just a car ride away. Number 11. Getting a Sony Discman and immediately having it skip. It is the late morning of December 25th. You are buckled into the back seat of the family car, heading to your grandmother's house for the second round of festivities. The heater is blasting and your parents are talking in the front seat, but you are in your own world. You're holding a sleek, dark grey circle in your lap, the Sony Discman D121. It feels substantial, heavy with the weight of 4 AA batteries. You pop the lid open, it's a mechanical clam. You take your new CD, maybe it's the Space Jam soundtrack or Jagged Little Pill, and snap it onto the spindle with a satisfying click. You put on the headphones, the ones with the thin metal band that pulls at your hair, and press play. The digital display flashes Woe 1, and suddenly crystal clear digital audio fills your ears. It is perfect. It is the future. Then, the car hits a pothole. The music stutters. Gangsters pa 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 pa. It stops. The silence is deafening. You look down at the device in betrayal. This was supposed to be the ultimate freedom, but you quickly learn the truth. The Discman was a lie. It was portable in name only. To make it work, you had to treat it like a bomb you were transporting for the government. You had to hold it perfectly flat, absorbing the shocks of the road with your own arms. Do you remember the ESP button? Electronic shock protection. It promised 3 seconds of buffer, a technological miracle that was supposed to save you. But even that had its limits. The memory of the Discman is a memory of stillness. It is the memory of sitting perfectly frozen in a moving vehicle, praying that the laser wouldn't lose its place, sacrificing your own comfort just to hear the chorus of your favourite song without a glitch. Number 12. Unwrapping a boombox. It is midday on Christmas. The living room floor is a colourful disaster zone of shredded wrapping paper, cardboard boxes and twist ties. The main frenzy of gift opening is finished, and your family is starting to clean up. But then, your father points to one final item tucked behind the easy chair. It is a large rectangular box, surprisingly heavy. You drag it into the centre of the room, feeling the weight of it. The box art is glossy, showing a sleek black machine surrounded by lightning bolts, and the words, Mega Bass. You tear away the paper and lift the styrofoam corners, and there it is. A JVC Kaboom, or a Sony CFD model. It is a beast of a machine. It has 2 cassette decks, a CD player in the centre, and speakers that look like jet engine turbines. You lift it out by the handle and it feels solid, a piece of serious hardware. You don't just put this on a shelf, you clear a dedicated space for it on your dresser. You're not just unboxing a radio, you're unboxing your independence. Before this moment, you listened to music on the family stereo or a small Walkman. But the boombox was different. It was a self-contained sound system that belonged entirely to you. You plug the thick AC cord into the wall, and the red LED lights spring to life. You press the open button on the tape deck and it opens with a slow, hydraulic-like grace. You pop in a cassette, maybe one you recorded yourself from the radio, and press play. The button goes down with a heavy, satisfying mechanical thunk. This object changed the atmosphere of your bedroom. It was the centerpiece of your personal space. Do you remember the bass boost button? It was usually yellow or red, separate from the other controls. Pressing it didn't just make the music louder, it made the plastic casing of the boombox vibrate. You could feel the thumping of the bass in your floorboards. It made your room feel like a nightclub, or at least the coolest place in the house. There was a tactile joy to these machines that is lost today. You had to physically interact with your music. You had to fast forward and rewind, listening for the silence between tracks. You had to clean the heads with a special cleaning tape, and if you wanted to take it outside, you had to raid the kitchen drawer for 8 D-cell batteries, adding 5 pounds of weight to the device. It was cumbersome and excessive, but carrying it by that handle made you feel powerful. It was the first time you had the power to control the noise, to fill a room with your identity loud and clear. Number 13. The Sony Walkman with the cassette you made. It is a quiet evening in mid-December. The rest of the house is asleep, but you're wide awake in your bedroom. The only light comes from the small red LED indicator on your stereo system. You're sitting on the edge of your bed, leaning forward with the intensity of a bomb defusal expert. Your fingers are hovering over 2 buttons simultaneously: play and record. You're listening to the radio, perhaps a station that is doing a top 40 countdown or a holiday marathon. The DJ is rambling on about the weather, but you're not listening to his words. You're listening for the first millisecond of a specific drum beat or opening synth line. You have a blank TDK or Maxell cassette tape loaded in the deck, wound to the exact spot where the clear leader tape ends and the magnetic brown ribbon begins. This was the art of the mixtape. Before drag-and-drop playlists, curating music required physical labour and impeccable timing. You wanted to capture that one specific version of All I Want for Christmas Is You or the Run DMC holiday track. When the song finally started, you slammed the buttons down. Click, clunk. The tape heads engaged, and you watched the little spools turn, mesmerizingly slow, capturing the invisible waves from the air onto the plastic ribbon. Do you remember the unique anxiety of the radio recording? You were at the mercy of the DJ. Nothing was more heartbreaking than getting a perfect recording of 3 minutes of a song, only for the host to start talking over the final chorus to announce a mattress sale. It ruined the vibe. You would have to rewind, find the gap, and wait for the song to cycle back around in an hour. It was a game of patience, but the result was a masterpiece of personal expression. You would take that cassette, maybe labelling it with a black felt-tip pen in your best handwriting, Ismus Mix 95, and slide it into your Walkman. Walking to school or riding in the car, listening to that tape felt different than buying an album. It had the crackle of the radio, the slight hiss of the tape, and the abrupt cuts where you paused it. It was imperfect, gritty, and entirely yours. Number 14. Nickelodeon's 12 Nights of Christmas. It is exactly 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening in the middle of December. You have finished your dinner, your homework is packed away in your bag, and you have claimed your spot on the living room rug. The room is bathed in the soft cathode ray glow of the television set. You aren't just watching TV to pass the time, you are participating in a countdown. The station break ends, and the screen fills with that iconic bright orange splat logo, but tonight it is wearing a Santa hat. For a kid in the 90s, Nickelodeon was more than a channel. It was a club you belonged to, and during December, they took over your life with the 12 Nights of Christmas. This wasn't just about watching cartoons, it was about the packaging. Do you remember the bumpers? The short claymation clips of the orange logo transforming into a snowman or a reindeer? There was a sense of continuity that modern streaming lacks. You felt like the people running the channel were celebrating right along with you. Each night was a promise. You knew that at 8 p.m. you would get a holiday-themed episode of your favourite show. One night it was Doug, worrying about Porkchop's Christmas gift. The next, it was Ren and Stimpy in a bizarre, slightly gross reimagining of a holiday classic. There was a comfort in this schedule. In a season that could feel chaotic with shopping and travel, Nickelodeon provided a reliable, cosy anchor. You knew exactly where you would be every night for 12 days. The 12 Nights event made the characters feel like your real friends. Seeing Tommy Pickles or Arnold in snow gear made them feel like they were going through the same winter you were. It blurred the lines between their world and yours. Sitting there in your pyjamas, with the Christmas tree lights reflecting off the screen, you felt a deep sense of belonging. You were part of a massive nationwide sleepover, all tuned in to the same orange frequency. counting down the days together until the real magic happened. Number 15. Recording Christmas specials on VHS. It is 7:58 p.m. on a Friday. The house is buzzing with the energy of the weekend, but you're standing perfectly still in front of the family television. You're not just a viewer tonight, you're an archivist. In your hand, you hold a black VHS cassette. It might be a brand new TDK tape still smelling of fresh plastic, or perhaps it's an old tape with a piece of scotch tape placed over the broken tab, ready to sacrifice an old episode of a soap opera for something far more important. You slide the cassette into the VCR. The machine accepts it with a slow, motorized hum, pulling it deep into its mechanical belly. The digital clock on the VCR reads 7:59. Your finger hovers over the rec button, shaking slightly. You're waiting for the exact second the commercial ends and the special begins. Too early, and you record the end of a car dealership ad. Too late, and you miss the opening title card. It is a high-stakes game of chicken played with magnetic tape. This act of recording was an act of preservation. In the 90s, if you didn't catch it on tape, it was gone into the ether. There was no watch from beginning button. You were building a physical library of your childhood. Do you remember the sound of the tape engaging? That distinctive clunk whir as the heads began to spin? Seeing that red rec light appear on the display was a moment of pure triumph. It meant you were safe. It meant that a Charlie Brown Christmas was now yours to keep forever. The tapes themselves became artifacts. You would write on the spine labels in shaky cursive, Xmas Specials 1994, and create your own marathon mix. Rewatching them years later, you wouldn't just watch the shows, you would watch the commercials. The ads for Chia Pets, The Clapper and Holiday Barbie became trapped in amber along with the cartoons. They provided a perfect snapshot of the world as it was on that specific night. There was a fragility to this medium that made it precious. You had to protect these tapes. You had to shout at your siblings, "Don't record over the Christmas tape." You had to adjust the tracking when the picture got fuzzy, turning a little dial until the lines disappeared. It wasn't high definition, and the audio sometimes wobbled, but that imperfection is what makes the memory so warm. It was a labour of love, a clumsy mechanical attempt to freeze time and hold on to the magic of the season for just a little bit longer. Number 16. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures. It is a Saturday morning in the winter of 1990. The sun is blazing through the sliding glass door, heating up the carpet in patches of bright, dust-filled light. You're awake long before your parents, fueled by the sugar of a bowl of colourful cereal. You're in your pyjamas, perhaps the ones with the feet, and you have claimed the living room floor as your domain. To an outside observer, it looks like a messy rug, but to you, this beige expanse is the gritty, dangerous streets of New York City. Scattered across this battlefield are the heroes. They are green, they are muscular, and they smell distinctly of fresh vinyl. You pick one up, Raphael, with his red bandana. The plastic is cool and hard, feeling incredibly solid in your hand. These weren't flimsy toys. They were dense, squat, and built for war. You twist his torso to the left, hear the slight plastic squeak, and then release it, watching his arms swing forward in a side-slashing motion. The Playmates Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figures were the gold standard of action figures. They didn't just look like the cartoon, they had texture. Their skin was bumpy, their shells were detailed, and their expressions were frozen in permanent grimaces of combat. Do you remember the accessories? They came attached to a plastic tree that you had to twist and snap off. There was a specific sharp sensation to breaking a katana or a nunchuck free from that frame, leaving little jagged nubs of plastic on the handles that rubbed against your thumb. Owning them was a status symbol, but playing with them was a social event. Friends would come over with their own collections, carried in plastic bags or shoeboxes. You would argue over who got to be Leonardo and who was stuck being Donatello. You would line up the foot soldiers and the bizarre mutant villains like Bebop and Rocksteady, creating elaborate storylines that always ended in a massive pile-up in the centre of the rug. This era was unique because the toys felt connected to a larger, darker world. The 1990 movie had just come out, which was gritty and dimly lit, unlike the bright cartoon. Playing with these figures allowed you to bridge that gap. You could make them goofy pizza eaters one minute and serious ninja warriors the next. In the quiet of that Saturday morning, with the cartoon theme song playing in the background, you were the director of the greatest action movie never filmed. Number 17. Super Soaker Water Guns. It is an overcast morning in late December, maybe a day or two after Christmas. The ground outside is covered in a layer of old, crunchy snow, and the thermometer on the back porch reads 28 degrees. You're indoors, wearing your warmest sweater, standing in front of the kitchen sink. In your hands, you hold a weapon that was designed for the blazing heat of July, but you cannot wait that long. You're holding the Super Soaker 50, with its iconic neon green and yellow plastic body. You unscrew the orange cap of the water tank. It makes a dry plastic squeak. You fill it with tap water, the liquid sloshing around inside the translucent reservoir. You screw the cap back on, tight, feeling the rubber gasket seal. Then you begin the ritual. This wasn't a toy where you just pulled the trigger. You had to work for your power. Shk, 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 shk. You pump the yellow handle on the front, feeling the resistance grow with every stroke. You're building pressure. You're building anticipation. The Super Soaker was a revolution. Before this, water pistols were cheap, transparent little things that squirted a pathetic, dribbling stream. But this was a piece of engineering. It felt industrial. It felt like you were holding a piece of Ghostbusters equipment. You aim it at the sink drain and pull the trigger. A powerful, cohesive jet of water blasts out, hitting the stainless steel with a satisfying, loud hiss. There was a specific torture to getting this gift in the winter. It sat in your room like a promise. You would stare at it, imagining the battles to come in 6 months. You would plan your strategy. You knew that the kid down the street had the Super Soaker 100, the one with the backpack reservoir, and you needed to be ready. It was an arms race, and you had just acquired a serious asset. But for now, it remained a secret weapon. You might sneak it into the bathroom during a bath, blasting plastic boats with high-pressure streams. Or you might just pump it up empty, listening to the air hiss out, visualizing the perfect shot. It was a dormant volcano of fun, waiting for the sun to come out, a neon-coloured reminder that winter wouldn't last forever. Number 18. The Barbie Dream House. It is late morning on Christmas Day. The chaotic storm of torn wrapping paper has been stuffed into black garbage bags, and the room has returned to a semblance of order. You're in the corner of the living room, near the heating vent where the carpet is warm. Standing before you is a box that is nearly as tall as you are. It is the big gift, the one that your parents saved for last, the one that required a dolly to move from the store. You watch as your father spends an hour wrestling with the assembly, snapping white Doric columns into pink floorboards and cursing softly at the sticker sheet. But when he steps back, the result is breathtaking. It is the 1992 Barbie Dreamhouse, a 3-story monolith of pastel plastic that dominates the room. It has working lights, a ringing doorbell, and a footprint larger than your actual bedroom closet. This wasn't just a dollhouse, it was a piece of real estate. It was the ultimate status symbol of the playground. Do you remember the elevator? That was the feature that changed everything. You would load Barbie in, pull the little string or turn the crank, and watch her ascend to the second floor with a shaky, jerky motion. It felt high-tech. It felt luxurious. It taught you that making it meant having a house where you didn't have to use the stairs. The house was a crash course in interior design. You spent hours arranging the modular furniture, deciding exactly where the vanity should go. There was a specific sound to playing with it, the hollow clatter of hard plastic dolls banging against hard plastic floors. The accessories were tiny and incredibly easy to lose. The microscopic forks, the translucent cups, and the tiny combs were treasures you guarded with your life. It was a fantasy world where everything was bright, clean, and perfectly pink. Sitting there, cross-legged on the rug, you weren't just playing, you were managing a household. You were imagining a life of convertible cars, pool parties, and walk-in closets. It was an aspirational fortress, a place where the weather was always perfect, and the only problem was deciding which sequined gown to wear to the kitchen. Number 19. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Toys. It is early morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The living room is a scene of joyous devastation. You're sitting amidst a sea of crumpled wrapping paper, but your focus is laser-sharp on the plastic blister pack in your hands. The cardboard backing features a burst of neon colours and a logo that defined your entire year. You rip the plastic open, not caring about preserving the packaging, and liberate the figure inside. It is Jason, the Red Ranger, or perhaps Tommy, the Green Ranger with the golden shield. You hold the figure up to the Christmas tree lights. It feels solid, substantial. But the real magic is in the mechanism. You place your thumb on the belt buckle, which is actually a spring-loaded button. You press it. Snap. In a blur of motion, the head flips down into the chest cavity and is instantly replaced by a helmeted version. You have just morphed. This wasn't just an action figure, it was a magic trick. The Automorphin line of toys captured the exact feeling of the television show. In 1993, Power Rangers wasn't just a show, it was a religion. You didn't just watch it, you studied it. And owning these toys allowed you to recreate every battle scene you memorized from Fox Kids. You would spend hours making them do karate kicks, providing your own sound effects, hi-ya, as they fought against invisible putty patrollers on the sofa cushions. Do you remember the sheer panic of your parents trying to find these? Before Tickle Me Elmo, this was the original toy shortage. Hearing stories of parents camping out at Toys R Us or fighting over the last Pink Ranger added a layer of prestige to the gift. If you had the full team, you were royalty. You would line them up on the coffee table, helmets gleaming, ready to summon the Megazord. It was a time when 5 teenagers with attitude could save the world, and holding those plastic figures made you feel like you could jump into the TV screen and join them. Number 20. Pogs and Slammers. It is the grey, quiet week between Christmas and New Year's. You're sitting on the hardwood floor of your hallway, or perhaps on the low-pile carpet of your basement. Scattered around you is a confetti explosion of small, circular cardboard discs. In your hand, you hold a plastic tube, the kind that smells vaguely of chemicals and is stopped with a colourful cap. You tip it over, and 50 more discs slide out with a dry, shuffling sound. You're sorting your fortune. You separate the poison skulls from the yin-yangs, the holographic ones from the simple 8-balls. But then, you reach for the most important item in the pile. It is heavy, cold, and metallic. It is your slammer. Maybe it's a thick brass kin slammer, or a jagged metal saw blade design that looks genuinely dangerous. You weigh it in your palm, feeling the density of it. This is your weapon. Pogs were the great equalizer of the mid-90s. It didn't matter if you were athletic or smart. If you had a good slammer and a steady hand, you could run the playground. Do you remember the specific mechanics of the game? You would stack the cardboard discs into a precarious tower, ensuring they were perfectly aligned. Then, you would grip the slammer between your fingers, squinting one eye in concentration. You raised your arm and brought it down with as much force as you could muster. Thwack! The sound of metal hitting cardboard was the soundtrack of 1995. It was a sharp, satisfying report that signalled the chaos. The stack would explode, sending Pogs flying across the floor. Then came the frantic counting. Did it flip? Is it face up? The difference between winning and losing was a matter of physics and luck. Finding a tube of Pogs in your stocking was like finding a roll of cash. It was currency. The artwork on them was a bizarre capsule of 90s grunge aesthetics. Weird monsters, surfing skeletons, and neon geometric patterns. They were useless, really, just milk bottle caps reinvented for a new generation. But for that brief, intense window of time, they were the most valuable things you owned. Sitting there on the floor, organising your collection into plastic binder sheets, you felt like a wealthy tycoon counting his gold. Number 21. The Batman action figure with the rope belt. It is late afternoon, just as the winter sun is dipping below the horizon. The streetlights are flickering on outside, casting long orange shadows across the snow. You're inside, lying on your stomach in front of the television, watching the most important opening sequence in cartoon history. Police blimps shine searchlights through the red sky, and 2 bank robbers blow up a building. You're watching Batman, the animated series. Clutched in your hand is the physical manifestation of that world. It is the Kenner Combat Belt Batman. Unlike the bulky, muscle-bound figures of the 80s, this Batman is sleek. He has broad shoulders and thin legs, perfectly capturing the dark deco style of the show. He wears a fabric cape that feels soft between your fingers, a rare luxury for an action figure. But the centerpiece is the bright yellow utility belt. This toy had a specific promise. You could be the Batman. The belt had a retractable grappling hook string hidden inside. You would pull the little black hook out, extending the thin white cord, and attach it to the edge of a table or a door handle. Then, you would clip the hook onto Batman's waist and let go. In theory, he would zip up the line, defying gravity, escaping the Joker's clutches to the safety of the sofa armrest. Do you remember the sound? That high-pitched zip of the internal spring coiling back up. It was the sound of justice, but it was also the sound of inevitable tragedy. Because every kid who owned this toy knows exactly what happened next. One day you pulled the string a little too far, or maybe it got a knot in it, or perhaps the spring just gave up the ghost. Suddenly the grappling hook dangled limply. The retraction mechanism was dead. You would spend the rest of Christmas trying to feed the string back into the tiny hole with a toothpick, but it was futile. The magic was broken. Yet, you didn't throw him away. Even with a broken belt, he was still the coolest figure you owned. He stood watch on your shelf, a silent guardian with a permanently deployed grappling hook, forever waiting for the signal that would never come. Number 22. Nerf weapons. It is the lull after the storm of gift opening. The parents are in the kitchen making coffee, and the living room is relatively quiet. You're standing at one end of the long hallway that leads to the bedrooms. Standing at the other end is your brother, your sister, or your cousin. The air is thick with tension. You're not holding a ball or a doll. You're gripping a grey foam shaft with a neon plastic handle. In the 90s, Nerf wasn't just about dart guns. It was about melee combat. Specifically the Nerf fencing set. It was the only gift under the tree that came with the explicit parental permission to hit your sibling. You lock eyes with your opponent, you raise the sword, and then chaos erupts. You charge down the hallway, your socks sliding on the hardwood floor. The battle is not elegant. It is a frantic flailing of limbs and foam. Thwack! Thwack! Thud! The swords make a dull, satisfying sound as they bounce off shoulders and heads. There is a specific smell to that grey Nerf foam. A chemical, rubbery scent that gets stronger as your hands sweat on the plastic hilt. Do you remember the feeling of invincibility? Nerf marketing was built on the premise of non-expanding recreational foam, meaning you could go full gladiator mode without anyone ending up in the hospital. It turned the living room into an arena. You would dive over ottomans and duck behind the sofa, dodging arrows from the Nerf bow and arrow set, or blocking strikes from the fencing sword. It was a safe way to let out all the excitement and sugar energy of Christmas morning. For 20 minutes you weren't a kid in pyjamas. You were a knight, a ninja, or a swashbuckler. And even when the foam eventually started to tear, revealing the white plastic core beneath, you kept using them. They were the tools of a harmless war, leaving no bruises, only memories of breathless laughter and the joy of sanctioned combat. Number 23. The Real Ghostbusters Proton Pack. It is late afternoon on a Tuesday during Christmas break. The sun has gone down early, and the house is full of long shadows. You're in the basement, or perhaps the long hallway upstairs, anywhere that feels slightly spooky. You're wearing a beige jumpsuit, or just your pyjamas that you're pretending is a jumpsuit. You're not a soldier or a superhero. You're a scientist. You're an exterminator. You reach for the heavy blue plastic box sitting on the floor. It has a bright orange hose connecting the main unit to the wand. You slip your arms through the plastic straps, which were always slightly too stiff and dug into your shoulders, and click the buckle shut. You feel the weight of the nuclear accelerator on your back. You're ready to believe you are a Ghostbuster. The Kenner Real Ghostbusters Proton Pack was a masterpiece of roleplay. It didn't shoot water or darts. It shot a yellow foam cylinder. You would twist the end of the wand, and this long, soft yellow noodle would spiral out. It looked ridiculous to anyone over the age of 10. But to you, it was a collimated stream of protons. Do you remember the PKE meter that came with it? Or the ghost trap that you could slide across the floor? The genius of this toy was that it encouraged you to destroy your own house. You weren't just running around, you were hunting. You scanned the washing machine for spectral activity. You blasted the family cat because it looked suspicious. The foam stream was soft enough that you could hit your brother in the face without causing real damage, but firm enough to knock over a stack of empty wrapping paper boxes. It was a toy that made the mundane corners of your home feel dangerous and exciting, transforming a cluttered laundry room into the site of an interdimensional containment breach. Number 24. Lights Alive. It is well past your bedtime. You're supposed to be asleep, but you have built a sanctuary. You have pulled the heavy duvet over your head, creating a small, airless cave of cotton darkness. In this private world, you are holding a rectangular device that hums with a faint warmth of battery power. It is the evolution of drawing. It is Kenner's Lights Alive. You grip the special stylus, which feels like a thick ballpoint pen. You press it against the black grid-textured screen. Crunch. It is a unique sensation, a tactile pop as the tip pushes through the opaque surface to reveal the glowing light beneath. You drag the pen across the grid, and a line of neon fire follows. This was the answer to every parent's prayer regarding the Leet Breet. There were no tiny plastic pegs to get lost in the shag carpet. There was no crinkly black paper to tear. It was self-contained magic. You could draw a glowing city, a spaceship, or just write your name in jagged, blocky letters. The limitations of the grid forced you to be creative, turning you into a pixel artist before you even knew what a pixel was. But the most satisfying part wasn't the drawing, it was the erasing. Do you remember the roller tool, or the slider on the back? When you were done, you would run the roller over the screen, smoothing the surface back to black. It was like an Etch-A sketch, but futuristic. The light would vanish, swallowed back up by the darkness, leaving you with a blank slate. In the quiet of that blanket fort, with the smell of laundry detergent and the soft yellow glow illuminating your face, you felt like a wizard. You were painting with pure light, creating masterpieces that existed for 5 minutes before being wiped away forever, leaving only the memory of that satisfying crunch in your fingertips. Number 25. Marvel Superheroes. 4-pack action figures. It is the afternoon of December 26th. The family gathering is over, the relatives have gone home, and you finally have the living room to yourself. You're lying on the carpet, surrounded by the remnants of yesterday's joy. In front of you is a large rectangular box with a clear plastic window. Inside, 4 giants of the Marvel Universe are frozen in plastic poses, waiting for liberation. This is the Toy Biz gift set, the Instant Army. You carefully slice the tape on the side of the box. You slide out the cardboard tray, breathing in that distinct new toy smell, a mix of vinyl, paint, and factory air. You ignore Spider-Man for a moment. You ignore the Hulk. Your eyes are fixed on the figure in the black bodysuit with the stark white skull painted on his chest. It is the Punisher. In the early 90s, Frank Castle wasn't just a comic book character. He was a symbol. He represented the shift from the bright, happy heroes of the past to something darker and cooler. Holding his action figure felt different. He didn't have superpowers. He had pockets. He had a trench coat. He had a grimace that said he wasn't here to play nice. Do you remember the specific articulation of those Toy Biz figures? They were stiff, yet durable. When you moved Punisher's arm, it made a sharp click, click, click sound. He came with an arsenal of tiny grey plastic weapons that didn't really fit in his hands, but that didn't matter. In the theatre of your imagination, he was the ultimate enforcer. This 4-pack was a storytelling engine. You would set them up on the coffee table, Spider-Man swinging from a lamp, Hulk smashing a coaster, and Punisher standing on a stack of books looking down with grim determination. It was a snapshot of a specific era in comics, where everyone had grit, everyone had pouches, and the good guys were just as scary as the bad guys. Having all 4 of them in one box felt like you had been given the keys to the entire Marvel Universe, ready to stage a battle that would last until dinner time. Number 26. Rugrats Christmas Specials. It is a lazy morning during winter break. The schedule of school has dissolved, and time feels fluid. You're wearing thick socks, shuffling into the family room with a plate of leftover Christmas cookies, the ones with the rock-hard red frosting. You turn on the VCR, the tracking lines flicker for a moment, and then you hear it. That whimsical, slightly off-kilter synthesizer melody by Mark Mothersbaugh. The screen fills with the squiggly, hand-drawn aesthetic of Klasky Chupo animation. You're watching the Santa Experience. For a generation of kids, this wasn't just an episode. It was the definitive holiday movie. It aired constantly in December, and many of us had it recorded on a VHS tape that we wore out from rewinding. The premise was simple but effective. The families rent a cabin in the mountains to have a perfect Christmas. It transported the familiar characters out of their suburban playpen and into a snowy, atmospheric world that felt adventurous and cozy all at once. This special perfectly captured the dual nature of Christmas through a child's eyes, the wonder and the anxiety. Do you remember the plot lines? There was Angelica, playing the villain, terrified of Cole, trying to trick Phil and Lil into giving up their toys. It introduced us to the concept of the nice list, in a way that felt genuinely high stakes. Watching Angelica panic about receiving a lump of coal made you examine your own behaviour over the last year, but the emotional core was Chucky. His fear of Santa Claus was something so many kids related to but rarely admitted. To a toddler, a giant bearded man breaking into your house is scary. The scene where Tommy tries to prove Santa is nice, only for it to go wrong, was a masterclass in that specific Rugrats humour. Chaotic, misunderstood, but ultimately sweet. And then there was the gift of the Magi moment with Phil and Lil. Watching them trade their most prized possessions, reptile food and colouring books, to get a gift for the other was genuinely moving. It didn't feel like a cartoon, it felt like a lesson in love. As the episode ended, with the snow falling outside the log cabin and the families gathered together, it gave you a warm, fuzzy feeling in your chest. It was a reminder that even amidst the chaos of crying babies and stressed out parents, the magic of the holiday always found a way to shine through. Number 27. The Are You Afraid of the Dark Christmas episode. It is Saturday night. The time is 9:30 p.m. You're in the basement, the only light coming from the television screen. You've just finished watching all that, laughing at the sketch comedy, but now the mood shifts. The screen goes black. A match strikes. A flame erupts in the darkness. You hear the wind howling and the creaking of a swing set. The Midnight Society has gathered. Most Christmas specials were about saving Santa or learning to share. But Nickelodeon knew that kids also love to be scared, even during the holidays. You wrap your blanket tighter around your shoulders as the episode title fades in. The Tale of the Frozen Ghost. This wasn't your standard festive fare. It was atmospheric and genuinely unsettling. It starts with a spoiled rich kid and a nanny, stuck at a remote farmhouse during a blizzard. The isolation hit differently when you were watching it safe in your warm home. You felt the cold radiating off the screen. It tapped into the old Victorian tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas, something you didn't know about historically but felt instinctively. Do you remember the ghost? The pale boy in the window? The way he whispered, "I'm cold"? It was a simple, primal fear. Unlike the colourful monsters of Goosebumps, this felt quiet and sad. The setting of the snowy woods and the creepy, abandoned feel of the location made the warmth of your own living room feel even more precious. Watching this episode was a badge of honour. It was the thrill of enduring the fear so you could talk about it at school on Monday. It proved that the holidays weren't just about tinsel and candy canes. They were also about the mysteries of the dark, cold winter night and the stories we tell to keep the shadows at bay. It was spooky, yes, but it was a safe spooky, protected by the orange glow of the Snick lineup. Number 28. Rocket Power Holiday Episodes. It is the late morning of December 28th. The excitement of the big day has faded into a comfortable boredom. You're lying on the sofa, upside down, with your legs resting on the back cushions and your head hanging off the edge. The blood is rushing to your face, but you're too lazy to move. On the television, the familiar surf guitar riff kicks in. Ocean Shores was a place that felt like a different planet to most kids in December. While you were looking out the window at grey slush and dead trees, Otto, Reggie, Twister and Sam were rollerblading on the boardwalk under a bright yellow sun. Watching Rocket Power during the holidays was a form of escapism. It promised a world where winter didn't mean freezing cold. It just meant you had to drive a little further to find the snow. Do you remember the specific plot of A Rocket X Maz? It was the classic 90s dilemma, the desire for the ultimate consumer good. Otto Rocket wanted the super snowboard. He didn't just want it, he needed it. It mirrored your own recent obsession with the catalogue. Seeing him hustle, walking dogs to earn the money, felt incredibly relatable. It was the grind we all understood, the desperate need to secure the coolest item to prove your worth at the skate park. But the episode hit harder because of the sacrifice. When Otto gives up his earnings to buy Sam a gift instead, it was a moment of genuine character growth wrapped in baggy cargo shorts and Oakley sunglasses. It taught us that being extreme wasn't just about landing the trick, it was about having your friends back. Watching it, with your own pile of new toys sitting nearby, gave you a little pang of conscience, a reminder that the best part of the season was the crew you spent it with. Number 29. The Santa Claus Movie. It is a Friday evening in mid-December. The school week is finally over, and the feeling of freedom is palpable. The living room lights are dimmed, and the coffee table is occupied by a greasy open cardboard box from Pizza Hut. Maybe a stuffed crust if you were lucky. The family has gathered on the couches, wrapped in Afghans. You pick up the white, puffy plastic clamshell case that defines Disney VHS tapes of the era. You pop the tape in, wait for the previews to finish, and settle in for the new gospel. In 1994, The Santa Claus didn't just feel like a movie, it felt like a documentary. It took the abstract concept of Santa Claus and grounded it in the real world of the 90s. It answered the logistical questions that kept you up at night. How does he fit down the chimney? He liquefies. How does the reindeer fly? Magic dust. Why didn't the adults believe? Because they lost the spirit. It built a logic to the magic that made it feel completely plausible. Tim Allen was the perfect vehicle for this. He wasn't a jolly old elf. He was a sarcastic, overworked businessman who wore ugly sweaters and went to Denny's. Watching his transformation, the sudden weight gain, the white beard that wouldn't shave off, the craving for milk and cookies, was a hilarious body horror that played out like a superhero origin story. It made the mythology feel modern, edgy, and cool. Do you remember the set design of the North Pole? It wasn't a cartoonish wonderland, it looked like a cozy high-tech fortress. The elves were children with attitude, equipped with jetpacks and tinsel that could cut through glass. It gave the workshop a sense of urgency and operation that appealed to a generation raised on action movies. But the true power of the film was how it made you feel. It validated your belief. When the little girl sees Scott Calvin and simply knows he is Santa, despite his suit, it gave you chills. It was a movie that told you it was okay to still believe, even if the world was cynical, even if your friend said it wasn't real. Watching it became a yearly requirement, a 2-hour contract that renewed your subscription to the magic of Christmas. Number 30. The Miracle on 34th Street remake. It is the evening of Christmas Day. The frenzy is over. The toys have been opened, the batteries have been installed, and the big dinner has been eaten. The house is quiet now, filled with a contented, sleepy heaviness. The Christmas tree lights are still on, casting a soft, multicoloured glow across the room, but the space under the branches is empty. You're curled up on the sofa, feeling that strange mix of happiness and melancholy that comes when the big day is finally winding down. You want to hold on to the magic for just a few more hours. You turn on the television, looking for one last taste of the holiday spirit. You find it in the 1994 remake of Miracle on 34th Street. While your parents might have preferred the black and white original, this was the version that belonged to you. It was shot in the rich, warm colours of the 90s, filled with familiar faces. Richard Attenborough was, quite simply, the definitive Santa Claus. He didn't look like an actor in a costume. He looked like the real deal. He had the kind eyes, the gentle voice, and the tweed suits that made him seem like a kindly grandfather who just happened to be magic. When he spoke sign language to the deaf girl, or when he corrected the store display, you believed him. He brought a dignity to the role that made the fantasy feel grounded and serious. Do you remember the courtroom scene? It was the ultimate playground argument brought to life. The moment they dumped the mailbags on the judge's desk was a triumph. It wasn't just about proving a man's identity. It was about proving that faith still had a place in the modern world. Seeing the "In God We Trust" circled on the dollar bill felt like a mic drop moment, a victory for every kid who had ever argued with a skeptic at school. As the movie ends and the credits roll, you look around your living room one last time. The 90s were a time of noise, neon, and rapid change, but in this moment, everything is still. You feel safe. You feel lucky. And as you drift off to sleep on the sofa, surrounded by your new treasures, you carry that feeling with you. The I believe button pinned to your heart, knowing that even though the day is over, the memory of this perfect Christmas will last forever. Number 31. Jingle All the Way. Arnold Schwarzenegger hunting for Turbo Man in 1996. It is a Friday evening in late November, just after Thanksgiving. You're sitting in the dark of a crowded movie theatre, the floor sticky with spilled soda, the air smelling of buttery popcorn and damp wool coats. On the giant screen, the biggest action star in the world isn't fighting a cyborg or an alien predator. He's fighting a mailman in a travel agency. You're watching Jingle All the Way. This film wasn't just a comedy. It was a mirror held up to the absolute madness happening in the malls outside the theatre. In 1996, with the news reports of Tickle Me Elmo shortages fresh in everyone's mind, the story of Howard Langston's desperate, sweaty hunt for a Turbo Man doll didn't feel like satire. It felt like a documentary. It validated every rumour you had heard about parents wrestling in toy aisles, turning the very real anxiety of the season into a slapstick cartoon that you were finally allowed to laugh at. Do you remember the specific allure of the doll itself? The movie did such an incredible job hyping Turbo Man, with his red suit, gold trim and the functioning jetpack, that you left the theatre genuinely wanting one. It captured the gloss and the noise of 90s commercialism perfectly. The bright neon-soaked halls of the Mall of America, the chaotic parade finale, and the sheer desperation of the adults made the holiday feel high stakes, like an action movie where the ultimate prize wasn't saving the world but saving Christmas morning. The movie remains a time capsule of a specific kind of pre-internet panic. It reminds you of a time when availability wasn't guaranteed, when you couldn't just click a button and track a package. It reminds you that the magic of the gift wasn't just in the plastic functionality, but in the epic, often ridiculous quest your parents went on to get it, battling blizzard traffic and other shoppers just to ensure you didn't wake up disappointed. Number 32, The Muppet Christmas Carol, the 1992 version that hit differently. It is a quiet evening, perhaps a Sunday. The weekend is winding down, and the dread of Monday morning is creeping in, but you push it away by sliding a clamshell VHS case off the shelf. The cover art features Kermit the Frog in a scarf and top hat sitting on a snowy street. You pop the tape in, and the familiar Walt Disney Pictures castle appears, followed by the sound of a brass band and Gonzo's voice announcing that he is Charles Dickens. For a child of the 90s, this wasn't just a funny puppet movie, it was the definitive version of the story. There was a specific alchemy to it that no other adaptation ever managed to capture. It balanced the absurd with the sincere. You watched Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat narrate the tale, breaking the fourth wall and falling off icy ledges, which made the Victorian setting feel accessible and safe. But then, the tone would shift. Do you remember Michael Caine's performance? He didn't wink at the camera. He didn't act like he was talking to felt and foam. He played Ebenezer Scrooge with a cold, biting seriousness that made the redemption feel earned. When he walked through the snowy sets, which looked like the most perfect cozy Christmas village imaginable, you felt the chill of his isolation. And the music. Oh, the music. One More Sleep Till Christmas wasn't just a song. It was the anthem of your entire December. It captured that vibrating, restless energy of lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wishing time would speed up. And when the ghost of Christmas yet to come appeared, that faceless, towering figure in the graveyard, it was genuinely terrifying. It didn't matter that Kermit was there. The silence of that scene haunted you. This movie taught you that it was okay to be sad and happy at the same time. It mixed the sorrow of Tiny Tim's empty chair with the joy of a rubber chicken falling on someone's head. Watching it felt like being wrapped in a warm blanket while looking out at a cold night, a perfect fuzzy encapsulation of the holiday spirit that stayed with you long after the credits rolled. Number 33. Checking TV Guide for Christmas Specials. Planning your entire week around the holiday issue. It is a mundane Tuesday afternoon. You're standing in the checkout aisle of the grocery store, bored, watching your mother unload items onto the conveyor belt. But then, you look at the magazine rack and your heart skips a beat. There, nestled between the tabloids and the recipe books, is the holy grail of December, the TV Guide Holiday Double Issue. This wasn't just a magazine. It was your strategic battle map for the next 2 weeks. You beg your mum to buy it, and the moment you get home, you sit at the kitchen table with a neon yellow highlighter. You crack open the spine, smelling that distinct cheap newsprint scent that is forever linked to anticipation. You bypass the articles and go straight to the grid. In the era of appointment television, this little book held the keys to the kingdom. You scanned the rows of tiny text with the intensity of a diamond cutter. A Charlie Brown Christmas on Tuesday at 8 e. Garfield's Christmas on Friday at 7:30. You highlighted them with aggressive precision. If you missed it, you missed it. There was no streaming, no watch from start. If you had basketball practice during Frosty the Snowman, it was a genuine tragedy. Do you remember the feeling of spotting a rare gem in the listings? Maybe a random Saturday morning airing of a claymation special you hadn't seen in years. It felt like discovering buried treasure. You would fold the corner of the page down, double-checking the VCR clock to ensure you were ready to hit record. This ritual turned television watching into an event. It gave structure to your holiday break. You weren't just passively consuming content. You were curating a schedule. The TV guide sat on the coffee table like a sacred text, its pages becoming wrinkled and soft from overuse as you checked and rechecked the times, ensuring that not a single moment of holiday magic would slip through the cracks. Number 34. The Christmas PJ Fairy, getting matching pyjamas on Christmas Eve to wear Christmas morning. It is 8:10 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The house is vibrating with energy. You've just had your bath, and your hair is still damp, cooling your neck. You're too excited to sleep, but you know the rules. Santa doesn't come if you're awake. You walk into your bedroom, and there, sitting on your pillow, is a single, wrapped box. It's soft. You know exactly what it is, but that doesn't diminish the thrill. The Christmas PJ Fairy has visited. In the 90s, this tradition was the ceremonial changing of the guard. You tore open the paper to reveal the fresh, crisp flannel. Maybe it was a red Stuart plaid, or a heavy hunter green with moose printed on it. You pulled them on, the fabric feeling slightly stiff but warm against your skin. They smelled of the department store and your mother's fabric softener. This wasn't just clothing, it was your uniform for the biggest event of the year. Do you remember the specific feeling of the waistband snapping into place? It signalled that the waiting was almost over. If you had siblings, you were now a matched set, a team ready to tackle the tree at dawn. There was a comfort in this ritual. It grounded the chaotic energy of the night. You weren't just going to bed, you were preparing yourself. You crawled under the covers, the new flannel catching against the cotton sheets, feeling clean, warm, and ready. You closed your eyes, knowing that the next time you opened them, the magic would be real, and you would be dressed perfectly for the occasion. Number 35. School Christmas parties with sherbet punch. The sugar rush was real. It is the last Friday before winter break. The clock on the classroom wall reads 1:30 p.m, but time has ceased to have any meaning. The fluorescent lights are humming, but the atmosphere is electric. The desks, usually arranged in rigid rows, have been pushed into chaotic clusters. The air smells of chalk dust, wet winter boots, and an overwhelming amount of artificial vanilla frosting. It is the annual class Christmas party, and the rules of education have been suspended. In the corner, on a folding table covered with a plastic red tablecloth, sits the main attraction. It is a large plastic bowl filled with a mysterious bubbling red liquid. Floating in the centre like a melting sugary iceberg is a quart of rainbow sherbet. This was the legendary holiday punch. It didn't taste like fruit. It tasted like pure, unadulterated joy. It was fizzy, creamy, and so sweet it made your teeth ache just looking at it. Do you remember the sensation of that first sip from a tiny wax-coated Dixie cup? The foam would stick to your upper lip. The sugar hit your bloodstream almost instantly. You were vibrating. The room was a blur of activity. Kids trading stained glass cookies, someone unwrapping a secret Santa gift that was clearly a dollar store mug, and the teacher standing by the chalkboard, smiling with the exhausted relief of someone who knows they don't have to grade anything for 2 weeks. But the peak of the party wasn't the food, it was the entertainment. The teacher would wheel in the AV cart, that towering metal structure with the CRT television strapped to it. The lights would go off, plunging the room into a cosy darkness. For the next hour you sat on top of your desk, dangling your legs, watching A Charlie Brown Christmas or How the Grinch Stole Christmas. It was a moment of perfect communal peace. There was no math, no spelling tests, just the warm glow of the screen and the collective buzzing of 25 kids high on sherbet, knowing that when the bell rang, freedom was waiting outside those double doors. Number 36. Classroom holiday programs. Performing in the winter concert with your grade. It is 6:30 p.m. on a Thursday night. You're standing in the hallway outside the school gymnasium, lined up in alphabetical order by last name. The air is thick with nervous energy and the smell of floor wax mixed with hundreds of different perfumes and colognes. You're not wearing your usual jeans and t-shirt. You're wearing your holiday best. For boys, it's a stiff button-down shirt that scratches your neck and a clip-on tie. For girls, it's a velvet dress with tights that refuse to stay up. You feel fancy, but also slightly suffocated. Inside the gym, the bleachers are packed with parents holding bulky camcorders, the red recording lights glowing like fireflies in the dim light. You march in, your footsteps echoing on the hardwood, and climb the wobbly metal risers. Standing shoulder to shoulder with your classmates, under the blazing heat of the stage lights, you feel a sudden wave of stage fright. You scan the dark sea of faces until you find them. Your parents, waving frantically. You offer a small, shy smile back. Then, the music teacher raises her arms. The piano intro to Winter Wonderland or Jingle Bell Rock begins. You open your mouth and sing, perhaps a little too loud, doing the choreographed hand motions you practiced for weeks. There is a purity to this performance. It isn't perfect. Someone is definitely singing the wrong verse. But the sound of 100 children's voices rising up into the rafters is undeniably powerful. Do you remember the relief when it was over? The thunderous applause that made you feel like a rock star? You scrambled down the risers, adrenaline pumping to find your family. They handed you a bouquet of flowers or a candy cane, telling you that you were the best one up there. Walking out to the car afterwards, your coat over your fancy clothes, the winter air felt crisp and victorious. You had performed for the masses, and for one night, the school gym wasn't just a place for dodgeball, it was Carnegie Hall. Number 37. Cutting down your own Christmas tree. The family trip to the tree farm. It is the first Saturday of December, a morning defined by grey skies and biting wind. Your family has piled into the car, dressed in so many layers that you can barely bend your elbows. You aren't going to the local grocery store parking lot to buy a tree. No, you are embarking on a journey to the country, which is really just 20 minutes past the suburbs, to a Christmas tree farm. The air at the farm smells incredible, a sharp, clean mixture of pine needles, wood smoke from a distant bonfire, and diesel exhaust from the tractor pulling the hayride. You grab a saw from the pile. It is a rusty bow saw with an orange handle that looks like it hasn't been sharpened since the Reagan administration. You march out into the fields, your boots crunching on the frozen mud, scanning the rows of evergreens like a general inspecting troops. This wasn't just shopping, it was a debate. Your father wants a tree with a straight trunk. Your mother wants one that is full on all sides. You just want the biggest one possible. You finally find it. The one. It looks majestic in the field. But now comes the hard part. Someone has to crawl underneath. You lie on the cold ground, pine needles digging into your back, and begin to saw. The wood is sticky with sap, and the saw jams every 3 strokes, but you keep going until you hear that satisfying crack and the tree teeters over. Do you remember the pride of dragging it back to the baler? Watching it get shoved through the metal funnel and wrapped in red netting felt like an accomplishment. Then came the feat of engineering, tying it to the roof of the car. You drove home slowly, listening to the wind whistle through the branches, praying the twine would hold. When you finally wrestled it into the living room stand, getting sap all over your hands, you realised the inevitable truth. It was way too big for the room. But as the scent of fresh pine filled the house, masking the smell of dinner and old carpet, you knew it was perfect because you had conquered it yourself. Number 38. Ceramic Christmas trees at Grandma's house. The glowing light-up kind. It is early evening at your grandmother's house. The air is thick with the scent of potpourri and baking sugar cookies. You're wandering through the living room, which feels more like a museum than a place to live. On the side table, resting on a crocheted doily, sits the crown jewel of holiday decor. It isn't a real tree. It is a heavy glazed ceramic cone, painted a deep, glossy forest green. This object was a staple of the era. Every grandmother seemed to have one, likely painted in a ceramics class in the late 70s. But to you, it is magical. It is covered in tiny, colourful plastic pegs that look like gumdrops, birds, or simple bulbs that slot into the holes. Inside, a single incandescent bulb burns, casting a warm, muffled light that makes the plastic glow with an intense jewel-like vibrance. Do you remember the temptation? You wanted to pull those little plastic bulbs out. You wanted to rearrange the colours, but you knew the rules. This was a look, don't touch item. It was fragile. It got hot to the touch after a few hours. Yet staring at it, with its snowy white tips and the plastic star on top, it felt like the essence of cosy. It wasn't flashy like the decorations at the mall, it was permanent, sturdy and comforting. A glowing beacon that signalled you were safe, you were fed, and you were loved. Number 39. Blow mould decorations in every yard. Plastic light-up Santas and reindeer. It is a crisp evening in mid-December, and you're walking home from a friend's house. The skies are deep, bruised purple, and the snow piles on the curb are dirty and frozen solid. The streetlights buzz overhead, but the true illumination comes from the lawns you pass. Standing guard in the snowdrifts are the sentinels of suburbia, the blow moulds. These weren't the delicate, tasteful fairy lights of today. These were hollow, 3-foot-tall plastic statues that looked like they were made in a factory that also produced traffic cones. There was the waving Santa with the slightly maniacal blue eyes. There were the choir boys with their mouths open in a permanent O. There were the reindeer that always seemed to tip over in the wind, lying on their sides like exhausted holiday casualties. Do you remember the sound they made when you tapped them? A hollow thud-thud, and the way they glowed. It wasn't a sparkle, it was a radioactive warmth. The single 60-watt bulb inside illuminated the entire plastic shell, making the red suits look magma hot, and the white beards look like glowing clouds. Up close, you could see the seams where the two halves of the mould met, and maybe a crack near the base where someone had kicked it last year. But from a distance down the long stretch of a suburban street they were magnificent. They were the lighthouses of the neighbourhood. Seeing that specific diffused glow reflecting off the snow gave the night a sense of wonder. They were tacky, sure, but they were also unpretentious and joyful. They stood out there in the freezing sleet night after night, beaming their simple plastic smiles into the dark, reminding you that for 1 month a year, the whole world was trying to be a little bit brighter. Number 40, Hickory Farm's kiosks at the mall, free summer sausage and cheese samples. It is a chaotic Saturday afternoon at the mall. You're exhausted. You've been dragged through 3 department stores, tried on stiff corduroy pants, and waited in line for 40 minutes to return a sweater. Your energy is crashing. But then, as you round the corner near the food court, you see it. The oasis. The little red barn structure sitting in the middle of the tiled walkway. The Hickory Farms kiosk has arrived. The smell hits you first, a dense, savoury wave of smoked meat that cuts through the usual mall scents of perfume and cinnamon pretzels. You tug on your mother's coat sleeve, not because you want to buy a gift basket, but because you know the secret. On the counter, arranged on a plastic tray, are the samples. Do you remember the specific taste of that survival ration? It was a cube of summer sausage, slightly sweaty under the heat lamps, paired with a cube of processed cheddar on a generic cracker. To a hungry kid, it was gourmet dining. It tasted salty, smoky, and incredibly rich. You would do the loop, walking past once to grab a piece, pretending to look at the boxes of strawberry bonbons, and then circling back 5 minutes later for a second round. The kiosk itself felt like a portal to a rustic, old-timey world that didn't exist in the neon suburbs. The packaging was distinct. The brown boxes with the red gingham patterns. Buying one of those long beef sticks felt like an adult purchase. It was the go-to gift for the uncle you didn't really know. But for you, in that moment, it wasn't about the gift. It was about the free snack that gave you just enough strength to make it to the toy store. Number 41. Lifesaver's Storybook. The book-shaped box of candy rolls. It is Christmas morning, and you have reached the bottom of your stocking. You have pulled out the orange at the toe, the loose walnuts, and the small plastic toys. But there is one final rectangular item wedged against the heel. You pull it out. It looks like a book, but it rattles. It is the Lifesaver's Sweet Storybook. This was the literary canon of the holiday season. It had no pages, no plot, and no moral lesson. It was simply a cardboard box designed to look like a hardcover volume, opening up to reveal 2 rows of candy rolls nestled in a plastic tray. To a kid, this was better than any library book. It was a multi-volume set of pure sugar. Do you remember the specific selection? There was the classic 5-flavour roll, the wild cherry, the butter rum, which you always traded to your dad, and the tropical fruits. There was a ritual to opening it, cracking the spine of the cardboard flap to gaze upon your library. You felt wealthy. You had enough candy to last until New Year's, provided you didn't crunch through them all before breakfast. The Sweet Storybook was the ultimate reliable stocking stuffer. It wasn't flashy and it wasn't expensive, but if it wasn't there, Christmas felt wrong. It was a tradition of simple abundance, a little cardboard library that promised that for the next week, your pockets would always be heavy with the rattle of hard candy. Number 42. Mall Santa Polaroid photos, waiting in line for that instant picture. It is a Saturday afternoon in early December. The mall is a crushing wave of humanity, but you're stuck in a slow-moving eddy at the centre of the atrium. You're standing in a maze of velvet ropes, inching forward on a faux snow carpet that has been trampled grey by 1,000 winter boots. Ahead of you sits the throne, a massive, gilt-edged chair flanked by plastic reindeer and oversized candy canes, and sitting in it is the man himself, This was the high-stakes celebrity encounter of your childhood. The line was a zone of mixed emotions, anticipation, boredom, and a creeping sense of stage fright. You spent the time studying the other kids, the ones crying in terror, the ones tugging on the elf's tunic, the ones reciting their lists under their breath like a mantra. When the elf finally waved you forward, the transition was abrupt. You were suddenly on stage. Do you remember the smell of the suit? It was a unique combination of peppermint, old cedar, and whatever cologne the temp worker hired for the season was wearing. You climbed onto the knee, which was always harder and more bony than it looked. You mumbled your request for a Game Boy or a bike, trying to ignore the fake beard that didn't quite move when he talked. It felt surreal, a brief audience with a king who held your fate in his gloved hands. But the point of the exercise was the photo. You were told to look at the helper holding the clunky camera. Flash. A blinding burst of white light that left spots in your eyes. Then came the mechanical whir as the camera spit out a square of white film. You hopped down, dazed, and watched as your parents waved it in the air to dry it. Slowly, magically, the image would ghost into existence, a slightly blurry, overexposed testament to the moment. That Polaroid slipped into a flimsy cardboard frame with the mall's logo on it was proof. You had done your duty. You had stated your case. Now, all you could do was wait. Number 43. Pick a mix candy at the store, building your own Christmas candy selection. It is a weekday afternoon, and you're tagging along for the weekly grocery run. The store is busy, the fluorescent lights reflecting off the linoleum, but you're not interested in the produce aisle. You're heading for the seasonal display near the checkout. It is a towering cardboard stand, usually branded by Brax, filled with rows of clear acrylic bins. This is the pick-a-mix station, and it is the closest thing to Las Vegas you have ever experienced. You grab a thin, white paper bag and the metal scoop, which is always tethered by a coiled wire. The weight of the scoop in your hand makes you feel like a prospector. You are mining for sugar. This wasn't about buying a pre-sealed bag where you had to tolerate the flavors you didn't like. This was about freedom. This was about curation. Do you remember the specific textures? The white nougats with the jelly bits that looked like stained glass. The hard, spicy cinnamon discs that would burn your tongue. The green spearmint leaves that were coated in granulated sugar that felt like sand. And the royals, those soft caramel rolls that stuck to your teeth for hours. You carefully ladled your favourites into the bag, feeling the weight increase with every scoop. There was a thrill in the weighing process. You would place your bag on the hanging scale, watching the red needle swing, hoping you hadn't gone over the limit your mother set. Hearing the crinkle of the paper bag as the cashier rang it up was a specific kind of satisfaction. You weren't just bringing home candy, you were bringing home a custom collection, a bag of edible jewels that you had hand-selected to get you through the long winter nights. Number 44. Bubble lights on the tree. The weird liquid-filled lights that warmed up. It is late in the evening, and the room is dark except for the glow of the Christmas tree. You're lying on your back under the lowest branches, smelling the sharp scent of pine needles and old dust. But you aren't looking at the ornaments or the tinsel. You're staring at one specific light, clipped precariously to a sturdy branch. It looks like a piece of scientific equipment that wandered into a holiday display. The base is a chunky fluted plastic that looks like a candle holder, usually in a bright opaque colour like red or yellow. But rising out of it is a glass vial filled with a mysterious clear liquid. You watch it intently. At first, nothing happens, but as the bulb in the base heats up, the magic begins. A single bubble forms at the bottom, then another, then a steady stream of tiny, frantic spheres starts racing to the top of the tube. There was something undeniably dangerous and thrilling about bubble lights. They got hot, really hot. If you touched the glass, you'd pull your finger back instantly. They felt volatile, like they were powered by some unstable chemical reaction rather than electricity. Watching the liquid boil and dance was hypnotic. It was a kinetic energy that the static fairy lights couldn't match. These lights often felt like heirlooms, relics from an older time that your parents brought out with a sense of reverence. They were fragile and temperamental, often requiring a few flicks to get started. But when they were all working, bubbling away in unison, they transformed the tree into a living thing. Staring at them in the quiet of the night, you felt like you were looking at 100 tiny lava lamps, a miniature, bubbling city of light that kept the darkness at bay. Number 45. setting out Kellogg's cornflakes for Santa, thanks to that 1991 commercial. It is the final trembling moments of Christmas Eve. The house is locked up, the fire is dying down, and your parents are ushering you towards the stairs. But there is one final crucial task remaining. You aren't reaching for the cookie jar or the tin of homemade fudge. Instead, you're reaching for the pantry door to grab a giant green box of Kellogg's cornflakes. This specific deviation from tradition was entirely due to one piece of marketing brilliance that aired in 1991. The commercial was simple. A sleepy little girl in pink pajamas spots Santa, and instead of asking for toys, she offers him her bowl of cereal. Santa eats cornflakes, she whispers, and just like that, a new canon was established. Do you remember the earnestness with which you poured that bowl? You felt like you were letting Santa in on a secret. Everyone else was leaving him heavy, sugary cookies, but you were giving him breakfast. You were looking out for his cholesterol. It felt modern and considerate. The memory is tied to the sound of that commercial, the soft, hushed tones, the clinking of the spoon, and the warmth of the interaction. Leaving that bowl on the table, perhaps with a banana sliced into it if you were feeling fancy, made you feel connected to that little girl on TV. You went to bed convinced that when Santa arrived, he would see your offering and nod in appreciation, grateful for the crunch of something familiar in a night filled with gingerbread. Number 46. Layaway pickup at Kmart. Parents finally bringing home the big gifts. It is a Tuesday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas. You're standing in the least festive part of the store, the service desk at the very back of Kmart. The air smells of floor wax and the distant buttery aroma of the popcorn machine at the front entrance. You're holding your mother's hand, and she's holding a small crinkled pink or yellow slip of paper. This wasn't just shopping, it was a rescue mission. For the last 2 months, your parents had been making secret pilgrimages here, paying $10 or $20 at a time to keep your dreams in storage. Layaway was the working-class magic trick of the 90s. It allowed you to claim a prize, a mountain bike, a tube TV, or a massive stereo system before you could actually afford it. Do you remember the tension of waiting for the clerk to return from the stockroom? That swinging door was a portal to a cavern of wonders. You stood on your tiptoes, peering over the high counter, heart pounding. When they finally emerged, struggling with a large, nondescript brown cardboard box, you knew. You didn't need to see the picture on the side. You knew by the size and the heft that the big gift was finally coming home. Walking out to the car, watching your dad wrestle the box into the trunk gave you a profound sense of security. The waiting was over. The item was safe. It was yours. Number 47. Blue light specials during Christmas shopping. The stampede at Kmart. It is the Saturday before Christmas, and the store is a battlefield. You're navigating the aisles of Kmart, which are so packed with carts and winter coats that it feels like bumper cars. The air is stiflingly hot, a mix of overheating radiators and stressed-out shoppers. The fluorescent lights overhead are humming their steady, headache-inducing drone. But then it happens. The public address system crackles to life with a burst of static. The conversation in the aisle stops. A voice, tinny and distorted, cuts through the noise. "Attention Kmart shoppers," it was the call to prayer. In aisle 12, sporting goods, for the next 15 minutes. And then you saw it, the beacon. A store clerk would wheel out a rolling metal cart with a police light mounted on a pole. They would flip the switch, and that strobe light would begin to spin, casting frantic blue splashes across the linoleum floor and the faces of the crowd. Do you remember the rush? It was a Pavlovian response. It didn't matter what they were selling. It could be tube socks, it could be wrapping paper, it could be a blender. The siren song of the blue light special triggered a primal instinct to gather. You would see grandmothers picking up speed, maneuvering their carts with surprising agility. You would get swept up in the current, rushing towards the blue glow just to see what the treasure was. There was a genuine thrill to the chaos. It turned shopping into a game show. For 15 minutes, that specific item was the most important thing in the world. People would grab 3 or 4, tossing them into their carts not because they needed them, but because they were winning. And then, just as quickly as it started, the clerk would switch off the light. The voice would announce the end of the special, and the crowd would disperse, leaving you standing there with a discount toaster you didn't need, feeling the fading adrenaline of the hunt. Number 48. S&H green stamps for gifts. Saving up stamps all year for Christmas redemption. It is a quiet evening in late autumn. The kitchen table is cleared of dinner dishes, and in their place sits a stack of flimsy newsprint-thin booklets. You're sitting next to your mother, and in front of you is a shoebox filled with thousands of tiny perforated rectangles. These are S&H green stamps, the unofficial second currency of your household. Your job is simple but critical. You are the licker. You take a strip of stamps, run your tongue along the dry, bitter glue on the back, and carefully stick them into the empty squares of the saver book. One page at a time, you watch the book fill up, transforming from empty paper into a brick of potential value. It is tedious work, but there is a hypnotic satisfaction to it. Each full book represents a victory, a tangible unit of progress towards Christmas. Do you remember the catalogue? It was a glossy book of dreams that lived on top of the refrigerator. You would flip through it, ignoring the boring things like blenders and towel sets, looking for the toys. A baseball glove cost 10 books. A new doll was 7. The math was intoxicating. You weren't just asking for a gift. You were earning it. You were trading a year's worth of grocery shopping for a piece of the magic. The trip to the redemption centre was the final act. It wasn't a store, it was a warehouse of rewards. You walked in with your stack of filled books, feeling like a high roller at a casino. The clerk would count them, stamp them, and then disappear into the back. When they returned with the item, the exact item from the catalogue, it felt like a heist. You hadn't paid money for this. You had paid with patience, with spit, and with the collective effort of a year spent saving little green squares of paper. Number 49. Radio Shack Christmas Shopping, the go-to for electronic gifts. It is a Saturday morning, and you have entered the holy temple of gadgetry. The store is small, narrow, and incredibly well lit. The walls are lined with pegboards, floor to ceiling, covered in thousands of unidentifiable grey and black components. The air has a specific smell, a mixture of ozone, hot electronics, and the faint metallic tang of solder. You are in Radio Shack. In the era before the Apple Store, this was where the future lived. You weren't here for clothes or candy, you were here for power. You walked past the wall of connectors and fuses, heading straight for the glass display cases. Inside sat the treasures of the season, the Armatron robotic arm, the Tandy electronic baseball game, and the Holy Grail, remote control cars. Do you remember the specific aesthetic of a Radio Shack toy? It didn't look like something from Toys R Us. It looked serious. It looked like engineering equipment disguised as fun. The Zip Zaps micro RC cars were small enough to fit in your palm but fast enough to annoy your cat for hours. And the walkie-talkies? They weren't flimsy plastic. They were heavy, rubberized bricks that promised a range of up to 3 miles, even if they only worked from the driveway to the backyard. But the true magic was the Battery of the Month club card. It was the first loyalty program you ever cared about. Standing at the counter, watching the clerk punch your red card so you could receive your free C-Cell or 9-volt, made you feel like a member of an exclusive guild. You were part of the tech elite. Walking out of that store with a bag full of batteries and a DIY electronic project kit gave you a feeling of immense potential. You weren't just going to play with your gifts, you were going to build them, wire them, and power them up. Number 50. Downtown window displays, elaborate animated scenes that stores installed overnight after Halloween. It is a freezing evening in late November, the kind where the wind whips down the avenues stinging your cheeks. You're wearing your heavy coat, your scarf wrapped twice around your neck. You're holding your father's hand as you walk down the sidewalk of the biggest city near you, Chicago, New York, or perhaps just the downtown of your local county seat. The streets are busy, but there is a hush of reverence as you approach the department store windows. Yesterday, these windows were covered in brown paper, but tonight, the paper is gone and a new world has been revealed. It is an act of overnight magic. You press your nose against the cold, thick plate glass, your breath fogging up the view for a second before you wipe it away with a mitten. It was the official signal that the season had arrived. The store behind the glass was just a building, but the window was a portal to the North Pole, a fragile, beautiful diorama that existed solely to make you stop, stare, and believe, just for a moment, that the toys inside might actually wake up when the city went to sleep.